Today I rise to speak in opposition to the nomination of Nancy Abudu to serve on the United States Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit. Ms. Abudu may well be the most radical judicial nominee nominated to date by President Biden. I've had concerns with Ms. Abudu's radical views and her apparent lack of respect for the rules of the court ever since her nomination. Then during her confirmation hearing, I asked her about allegations of potential judge shopping raised by Judge Burke of the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Alabama in a series of cases brought by the Southern Poverty Law Center. As a result of troubling attorney conduct in this series of cases, the three federal district courts in Alabama took the extraordinary and joint measure of convening to hear concerns raised by Judge Burke that Ms. Abudu's litigation team and their co-counsel brazenly abused judicial process. Ms. Abudu is, to be clear, the Director of Strategic Litigation for the Southern Poverty Law Center. And strategic litigation, is what they do. That's what they're about, and she's the director of this division. Now, when I asked her about her strategic litigation decisions in this series of cases, she stated, quote, "As Director of Strategic Litigation, my responsibility is to oversee and provide general management for our cases. But it is the subject matter experts in the litigation team that handled the day-to-day, including the filing of complaints, the briefing, and any oral arguments," close quote. In response to my question, she refused to be forthright. She didn't deny her oversight of these cases. She simply refused to admit that she was responsible for the strategic decisions that the three Alabama federal district courts found so troubling. Her lack of candor and her apparent disregard for the protections built into our legal system disqualify her for a position on the United States Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit. As I asked her about these cases, pointing out only that the day-to-day litigation management was handled by other attorneys, which was obvious, she was openly, directly avoiding a direct line of inquiry, a line of inquiry that was very relevant to her nomination, to her confirmation process. But unfortunately, my concerns with Ms. Abudu's nomination do not end, and they didn't begin with this troubling series of cases that I've just described. You see, the attorneys general in every single state of the 11th Circuit, who were joined, by the way, by the attorneys general of a number of other states, but every single attorney general serving within the 11th Circuit was part of this letter, articulating concerns and confirming that there are grave dangers in confirming Ms. Abudu to the 11th Circuit. These attorney general, along with attorneys general from 15 additional states, including my home state of Utah, recently sent a letter to the leadership of this body expressing their numerous concerns with Ms. Abudu's nomination. The attorneys general of the people who would be subject to coming before Ms. Abudu in federal cases are justifiably worried about her potential confirmation today. These are people who really need to be able to have the confidence that when appearing before Judge Abudu, that she'll not only respect the law, but that she'll handle their cases without any preconceived biases that could lead her off course as she administers justice in her courtroom. If anyone has preconceived notions, biases regarding how justice ought to be administered, such that litigants could come to the conclusion that they won't get a fair shake in front of that judge, not to mention the preconceived prejudices against the good people living in the 11th Circuit, Ms. Abudu has certainly demonstrated that she does. Ms. Abudu is a longtime and current member and past leader of an entity called the National Lawyers Guild. Now, this group identifies itself as consisting of a radical movement of legal activists. Their words, not mine. After violent protests against Atlanta police officers, the National Lawyers Guild declared, quote, "Policing is the true threat to our collective safety." Imagine that. It's not crime. It's not other problems that police deal with. It's the police themselves, policing, the act of policing. They didn't say specific police officers who may, unlike most officers, not be doing their jobs right. They said policing. Policing is itself the true threat to our collective safety. Imagine that. Now, I agree with these attorneys general that Ms. Abudu's longstanding and ongoing association with this radical anti-police group is alone ground for refusing and rejecting her nomination. I find it very troubling indeed that those who would be subject to having to come before Ms. Abudu find her track record dishonest and divisive. Let me quote from the letter outlining their concerns. Quote, "We are familiar with Ms. Abudu's work and her willingness to demonize those with whom she disagrees, and we know the importance of the seat on the 11th Circuit that she would fill. Ms. Abudu has proven herself unfit for that role. She's compared her fellow Americans to Jim Crow-era racists. She has aligned herself with self-proclaimed radical movement legal activists who view policing as the true threat to our collective safety." And the quote continues, "And she has proclaimed that our criminal justice system is practically the same system as during slavery. These spurious and outrageous statements vividly demonstrate that she lacks the judgment, fair-mindedness, and integrity required of a federal judge." Close quote. Now, to be clear, Ms. Abudu chose to associate herself with the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is itself well known for leveling unfounded charges of hate against any person or any group with which that organization happens to disagree. She became a leader in that organization and fully embraced its deplorable tactics, which are not intended to foster debate and understanding, but rather to silence opposition. They're well known for publishing things. Their hate list has brought about hate, led to a shooting in Washington, D.C. of an entity here. Someone got shot after believing that the Southern Poverty Law Center had indicated that that was the appropriate action. She's made offensive and baseless assertions against the people in the 11th Circuit. Now, I'm going to quote some more from the Attorney General letter. Quote, "Since becoming a leader of the Southern Poverty Law Center, Ms. Abudu has engaged in the deplorable tactics beloved by that organization by disparaging those in her way, including each of the 3 states within the jurisdiction of the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. For example, she and her team submitted a report to Congress about Alabama's supposed unyielding record of racial discrimination in voting. The Alabama Attorney General's office set the record straight in a follow-up report that went claim by claim, documenting the SPLC's many misrepresentations. The quote continues, quote, "Each misrepresentation served the overarching theme of Ms. Abudu's report, that any disagreement over policy is proof that her political opponents are evil. Indeed, according to Ms. Abudu, things in Alabama are the same or worse today than they were in 1965. As she tells it, Alabama's goal today is to, and now these are her words, establish white supremacy in this state." The letter continues, "While some might see room for a good faith debate, for example, about the merits of Alabama's voter identification law, which was upheld by the 11th Circuit, the court on which she's been nominated to serve, Ms. Abudu sees only a relentless commitment to finding new ways to keep Alabamians from making their voices heard, all part of a desperate attempt to perpetuate majority white control." Her words, not mine. The letter concludes, "These assertions are as offensive as they are baseless, and they are disqualifying for an aspiring federal judge." To quote one more time from the letter, another part of the letter says, quote, though Ms. Abudu is surely aware of the facts, she prefers to use her powerful position at the Southern Poverty Law Center to sow division and erode trust among Americans, declaring that Jim Crow is still alive and well in the South. But as the Supreme Court has recognized, and as any fair-minded person knows, things have changed in the South. Ms. Abudu's contrary contention doesn't show simply professional disagreement. It shows, at best, insuperable bias. It more likely shows dishonesty, and it certainly shows unfitness for judicial office. I ask, by the way, the unanimous consent to submit and enter into the record the letter from these attorneys general.
Without objection.
She's shown marked hostility toward Alabamians, Floridians, and Georgians. She's accused them of suppressing minorities and poor people from voting. She's accused their police officers of targeting minorities. And all throughout her accusations is the thread of racism. It animates her every action, her every assault, her every view. She accuses Georgia of being, quote, committed to keeping us in the past, and that is scary, close quote. As the attorneys general appropriately ask, how could Ms. Abudu impartially adjudicate the many 11th Circuit cases involving Georgia, its statutes, its citizens, and especially its law enforcement officers, when she already believes the state is a bad actor, with a culture of law enforcement that targets black and brown people? There again, they're quoting her words. Ms. Abudu's record of hostility towards the people and the laws of the 11th Circuit is nothing short of alarming. When you combine that hostility with her lack of respect for the judicial system and her ongoing commitment to a group of self-described radical movement legal activists, I simply don't know how any member of this body can still believe she will serve the people of the 11th Circuit, or even less, our judicial system well. Look, the only way one can justify voting for this nominee is if one agrees with her hostile views and is comfortable with her activist approach. I am not, and I oppose her nomination in the strongest possible terms. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Wisconsin.
Mr. President, I know of no further debate.
Is there further debate? Hearing none.